Santa Paulo is one of those California towns. The population is just over 8,000, most of whom work on local farms or commute to factories in neighboring towns. It is still customary here to greet strangers on the street and leave doors unlocked. At the center of this quiet little world was the Robinson family. Giles and Gloria lived in a white two-story house on Oak Street, with a neatly trimmed lawn and rose bushes under the windows. Their home was the embodiment of the American dream: a flagpole in the yard, a swing set on the porch, children's bicycles casually propped against the driveway. Giles Robinson had served on the Santa Paula Police Department for 17 years. At 42, he looked exactly how a small-town cop should look: strong, reliable, with graying temples and a firm handshake. His colleagues respected him for his professionalism, and the townspeople trusted him unconditionally. He knew the names of all the local teenagers, remembered the birthdays of his elderly neighbors, and never gave anyone a ticket for going 5 miles over the speed limit. Giles is what keeps this town from falling into chaos, Sheriff Thomas McCain, his immediate superior, liked to say. And it was true. Robinson settled family disputes with the patience of a priest, patrolled the streets with fatherly concern, and was always the first to respond to calls, even on his days off. Every morning at 6:30, Giles woke up, took a shower, and had breakfast with his family. Gloria always made him bacon and eggs and freshly squeezed orange juice. Their children, 15-year-old Brad and 12-year-old Emily, hurriedly ate their cereal before school, complaining about their homework and planning to meet their friends. Gloria worked as a nurse at the local hospital in Santa Paula. At 39, she retained the special beauty that comes with self-confidence and life experience. Her light brown hair was always perfectly styled, and her modest clothes emphasized her dignity and respectability. Her colleagues valued her for her professionalism and compassion toward patients, and patients often asked for Gloria to care for them. She could calm anyone with a single glance, recalled Dr. Maria Hernandez, the hospital's chief physician. Gloria was one of those nurses who healed not only the body, but also the soul. The Robinsons were active members of the Methodist Church on Chapel Street. Every Sunday, they occupied the third pew on the left, always in the same order: Giles, Gloria, Brad, and Emily. Gloria sang in the church choir, and Giles helped organize the annual charity bazaar. Their children attended Sunday school and youth groups. Reverend James White, their church pastor, considered the Robinsons a model Christian family. "They embodied all the values we preach," he said later: love, loyalty, community service. "I often held them up as an example to other couples." However, those who knew Giles better sometimes noticed something elusive about him. His patrol partner, Officer Rick Davis, who had worked with him for the past 5 years, sometimes caught Giles looking strange. At times, it seemed like he was thinking about something far away, Davis recalled. "We would be driving in the car, and suddenly he would fall silent for half an hour. When I asked if everything was okay, he always said he was just tired, but it wasn't just fatigue." Gloria also noticed changes in her husband, although she couldn't quite put her finger on what was wrong. Giles became more silent at home, often staying up late at the computer, supposedly working on reports. He initiated intimacy less often, citing fatigue or stress at work. "I thought it was a midlife crisis," she admitted later. "Men his age often reevaluate their lives. I tried to be understanding and gave him space." That spring, a new high school teacher arrived in Santa Paulo. Michael Thornton, 35, an English and literature teacher, had moved from San Francisco. Officially, he explained the move as a desire to live in a quieter place, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. He rented a small apartment on Elm Street, a few blocks from the Robinsons' house. Thornton quickly gained a reputation as a talented teacher. His lessons were lively and interesting, and he knew how to engage even the most indifferent students. Brad Robinson, a 10th grader, often talked about his new teacher at home. "Mr. Thornton is not like other teachers," Brad would say at dinner. "He reads excerpts from books to us in a way that gives me goosebumps, and he's traveled a lot and tells interesting stories." Giles listened to his son's stories with unusual attention. Once he even offered to drive Brad home after a school event so he could accidentally meet the new teacher. The meeting took place in late April, after a school play directed by Thornton. Nice to meet you, Officer Robinson, Michael said, shaking Giles's hand. Your son is one of my best students. Giles felt something strange about the handshake, about how long Michael looked him in the eye. Later, he couldn't explain the feeling, but something inside him changed at that moment. In May, Giles began patrolling the area around the school more often. He told himself it was for the children's safety, but deep down he knew he was hoping to see Michael. Sometimes their eyes met through the classroom window, and Giles felt a strange excitement that he tried to suppress. Gloria noticed that her husband had become even more distracted. He forgot about family plans, answered the children's questions mechanically, and often went out for walks alone in the evenings. When she asked him how he was feeling, Giles assured her that everything was fine, but his eyes told a different story. Maybe you should take some time off, she suggested at the end of May as they were getting ready for bed. You look exhausted. No, honey, everything's fine, Giles replied, without looking up from the book he wasn't reading. Just a lot of work lately. But there was no more work than usual. Santa Paulo remained a quiet town where the most serious crimes were petty theft and domestic disputes. The real reason for Giles's anxiety was quite different, and he was afraid to even admit it to himself. Meanwhile, Michael Thornton was also experiencing an internal conflict. Moving to a small town was supposed to be a new beginning for him, an escape from his past and his own demons. But meeting Giles had awakened feelings he had been trying to forget. The first chapter ended on a quiet summer evening in June. The Robinson family was having dinner in the garden, enjoying the warm weather. Gloria served homemade apple pie. The children talked about their summer plans for school, and Giles looked silently toward the trees, where he could see the roof of Michael Thornton's house. July brought typical California heat to Santa Paula. The thermometer read over 30 degrees Celsius in the morning, and by noon the air was thick and still. On days like this, life in the town slowed down. People hid in air-conditioned rooms, and the streets were deserted until evening. For Giles, this time was particularly painful. Patrolling the deserted streets in a stuffy police car, he found himself thinking more and more about Michael Thornton. He began to study the teacher's schedule, memorizing what time he left school, where he bought groceries, and when he went out for his evening run. Giles, are you with me? Rick Davis's voice brought him back to reality. They were sitting in their patrol car near a shopping center, and Davis had been talking about his vacation plans for several minutes. Giles realized he hadn't heard a word. Sorry, Rick, what were you saying? I was asking about your plans for August. The sheriff wants to set the vacation schedule. Davis looked closely at his partner. Are you okay? You've been acting strange these past few weeks. Everything's fine. It's just the heat getting to me. But it wasn't the heat. Giles was struggling with feelings he couldn't understand or control. He had spent his entire adult life following a strict set of rules: faith, family, service. His world was black and white, with no shades of gray or doubt. Now something inside him was changing, and he didn't know how to deal with it. The encounter happened by chance on a Saturday morning at the grocery store. Giles was buying milk for the family breakfast when he saw Michael in the produce section. The teacher was selecting tomatoes, carefully feeling each one. He was dressed in a simple white t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly tousled from his morning run. Officer Robinson, Michael smiled when he noticed him. How are you? Everything's fine. Just call me Giles. He felt his heart beat faster. How do you like our town? Getting used to it? Gradually. It's very different from San Francisco, but in a good way. It's quiet here. Michael hesitated, then added, sometimes too quiet. There was something in his words that made Giles pause. They talked for a few more minutes about the weather and their plans for the summer, but there was something more beneath the usual pleasantries. Giles noticed the way Michael was looking at him, not the way men usually look at each other in a small town. Maybe we could get a coffee sometime? Giles suggested, surprising himself. I mean, if you need help getting around town or anything. Yeah, that would be great. Michael was clearly pleased by the offer. I have a pretty open schedule in the summer. They agreed to meet on Monday evening at Mary's coffee shop on Main Street. Giles spent the rest of the weekend in a strange state of excitement, which he tried to hide from his family. Gloria definitely noticed the change in her husband. After 18 years of marriage, she had learned to read his moods, and something was off. Giles was paying more attention to his appearance, spending more time in the bathroom, and had even bought a new cologne, claiming that his old one had run out. "Dad, you smell nice today," Emily remarked during Sunday breakfast. Giles blushed, and Gloria gave him a questioning look. "New cologne," he explained, without looking up from his plate. On Sunday at church, Gloria watched her husband during the service. Usually, Giles listened attentively to Reverend White's sermon, occasionally nodding in agreement and singing the hymns in his low baritone voice. Today, he seemed absent, staring out the window and clearly thinking about something else. The sermon was about faithfulness, both marital and spiritual. Reverend White spoke about the importance of honesty in relationships, about how secrets destroy trust between people. Giles tensed when the pastor said, "The Lord sees our hearts, brothers and sisters. We cannot hide our true desires from Him." After the service, families traditionally gathered in the churchyard to discuss their plans for the week and exchange news. Gloria talked with the other women about the upcoming charity bazaar, while Giles stood apart with a group of men. "Have you heard that our new teacher is doing well?" said Tom Harris, whose son was in Brad's class. "The kids love him." "Yes, Brad talks about him a lot," replied Giles, trying to sound indifferent. "He seems like a talented teacher." "It's just strange that a young man would move to our town," remarked Frank Miller, a local banker. "Usually people his age want to move to the big city, not the other way around." "Maybe he's tired of the hustle and bustle," Giles suggested. "Or maybe he's running from something," Miller grinned. "These days you never know what's going on in a person's mind." Giles felt a twinge of irritation. He wanted to defend Michael, but he knew it would look strange. Instead, he kept quiet, but mentally noted the unpleasant tone of the conversation. Monday dragged on interminably. Giles checked the time several times, thinking about the upcoming meeting. He told Gloria he was going to be late because of reports, and she didn't ask any questions. It happened regularly. At 7 o'clock, he entered Mary's coffee shop. Michael was already sitting at a table in the corner reading a book. When he saw Giles, he smiled and waved. "What are you reading?" Giles asked, sitting down opposite him. "Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire. I'm planning to stage an excerpt from the play with my students." Michael put the book down. "Do you read anything other than police reports?" "Not as much as I'd like. I used to love detective stories, but now I don't have time for them." They ordered coffee and began talking about books, movies, and life in a small town. Giles found Michael to be an interesting conversationalist who knew how to listen and ask thoughtful questions. Time flew by. "Tell me about your family," Michael asked. Brad often mentions his sister and mother. Giles told him about Gloria, how they met in college and their children. But when he talked about his family, he felt uncomfortable, as if the very fact of this conversation was a betrayal. "What about you? Did you have a family in San Francisco?" he asked in turn. Michael paused for a moment. "I had a relationship, but it didn't work out. That's actually why I decided to start over somewhere else." "I understand. Sometimes you need a change of scenery." They sat in the coffee shop until 9 in the evening. When they parted, they agreed to meet again the following week. Giles drove home in a mood he hadn't felt in months. At home, Gloria asked him why he was so late. "A lot of paperwork," he lied. "New instructions from the county." "You look rested," she remarked. "Maybe you really do need to work more in the office instead of driving around in the heat." Giles nodded, but he knew it wasn't the work. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive, interesting, needed, and that scared him more than anything else. Over the next few weeks, their meetings at the coffee shop became regular. Officially, Giles was helping Michael adjust to the city, telling him about local traditions and people. In reality, they talked more and more about personal things, their dreams, disappointments, and feelings of not belonging. "You know what's strange?" Michael said during one of their meetings. "I moved here to be normal, like everyone else, to get married, start a family, live a proper life. But instead," he didn't finish his sentence, but Giles understood. Something similar was happening to him. The more he tried to be a model husband and father, the more he felt an inner emptiness. Gloria began to suspect that her husband was lying to her. His work meetings became too frequent, and he was unusually cheerful after them. She tried to delicately ask him about his new job responsibilities, but Giles was evasive. One evening in late July, she decided to drive past the police station. Giles's car wasn't there, even though he had said he would be working late. Gloria felt her heart sink with anxiety. That night, when Giles came home, she couldn't sleep for the first time in years. Lying next to her husband, she wondered what could have happened to their marriage. Gambling? Alcohol? Another woman? Any of these options seemed unlikely, but something was definitely going on. The next day, while working at the hospital, Gloria was distracted and quiet. Her colleagues noticed her state. "Are you okay, Gloria?" Dr. Hernandez asked during lunch break. "You don't seem like yourself today." "I'm just tired. The heat is getting to everyone." But Dr. Hernandez had known Gloria for many years and knew that it wasn't fatigue. There was a look of concern in the nurse's eyes that no amount of heat could dispel. Meanwhile, the relationship between Giles and Michael continued to deepen. What had started as friendly encounters gradually turned into something more. They hadn't crossed the line yet, but both felt an attraction that was growing stronger. The chapter culminated on an evening in early August. Giles and Michael met not at the coffee shop, but took a walk in the city park. The sun was setting, the air was finally cooling, and they walked slowly along the path by the pond. "Giles," Michael said suddenly, stopping, "I have something to tell you." The policeman felt his heart beat faster. He knew that something was about to happen that would change everything. "I understand that this is difficult, but I think there is something special between us, and I can't pretend it's just friendship anymore." Giles was silent, staring at the water. Duty and desire, fear and hope were battling in his mind. "Michael," he began, but didn't know how to continue. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel." At that moment, Giles realized he was standing on the edge of a precipice. One more step, and his measured, predictable life would collapse. But something inside him had already taken that step. August brought not only sweltering heat to Santa Paula, but also unexpected thunderstorms. It was just such a storm that caught Giles and Michael in the park that evening when the teacher confessed his feelings. The first heavy raindrops forced them to take shelter in an old gazebo by the pond. "Looks like we're here for a while," Michael said, looking up at the darkening sky. Giles was silent, still processing what he had heard. They stood close together in the cramped gazebo, and the policeman could feel the warmth emanating from his teacher's body. Thunder rumbled directly above them, and Giles shuddered involuntarily. "Are you okay?" Michael put his hand on his shoulder. At that moment, something broke inside Giles. 18 years of repressed feelings, doubts, and inner struggle burst forth. He turned to Michael and, without saying a word, kissed him. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but for Giles, it was a lifetime. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing heavily. "I'm sorry," Giles muttered. "I don't know what came over me." "Don't be sorry," Michael said quietly. "Please don't be sorry." The storm ended as suddenly as it had begun, but their world had changed forever. They parted in complete silence, each knowing that they had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. At home, Giles stood under the shower for a long time, trying to wash away not only the rain but also the feeling of his own betrayal. When he came out of the bathroom, Gloria was already asleep. He lay down next to his wife, with whom he had lived for 18 years, and for the first time felt like a complete stranger in his own bed. The next few days were torture for Giles. He avoided Michael, didn't answer his messages, and tried not to go anywhere he might run into him. But the more he tried to forget that kiss, the more vividly it flashed in his mind. Gloria noticed another change in her husband's behavior. Whereas before he had been distracted and absent, now he seemed tormented and guilty. He became overly attentive to her and the children, as if trying to atone for some kind of guilt. "How about we go to the movies as a family?" he suggested on Saturday morning. "It's been a long time since we spent time together." "Sure, that's a great idea," Gloria agreed, though she was surprised at herself. She was usually the one who initiated family activities. At the movie theater, Giles tried to be the perfect family man. He bought popcorn for the kids, held Gloria's hand, and laughed at the comedy. But she could see that his smiles were forced and his laughter insincere. After the movie, they went to an ice cream parlor that the children loved. Emily talked about her plans for the new school year, and Brad complained about his summer math homework. Gloria watched her husband, who nodded mechanically and agreed with everything that was said. "Dad, are you listening to me?" Brad asked. "Of course, son. You were talking about school." "I was talking about Mr. Thornton asking me to be in the school play." At the mention of Michael's name, Giles tensed up. Gloria couldn't help but notice his reaction. "That's wonderful, Brad," she said. "What play are you going to perform?" "Romeo and Juliet." "Mr. Thornton says I have a talent for drama." "Maybe you shouldn't," Giles said unexpectedly. "You have enough to do at school." The family looked at him in surprise. Giles usually supported his children's endeavors. "But Dad, it's interesting," Brad protested. "Your father is just worried about your grades," Gloria interjected diplomatically. "We'll discuss it at home." On the way home, a tense silence hung in the car. The children sat in the back seat, looking at each other, puzzled by their father's strange reaction. Gloria stared out the window, thinking about her husband's behavior. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, she decided to talk to Giles frankly. "What's going on?" she asked as she entered their bedroom, where he was sitting on the bed staring at his phone. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend. You've been acting strange for the last few months. You're either absent or overly attentive. And then there's your reaction to Brad's teacher." Giles felt his heart quicken. "What reaction?" "I just think it's better for our son to focus on his studies." "Giles, we've known each other for 18 years. I can tell when you're lying." He looked at his wife, her familiar face, her light hair, her caring eyes. This woman had given him children, shared his joys and sorrows, and been his rock throughout their life together. And he had betrayed her in the most despicable way. "Gloria, I'm going through a difficult period at work, a lot of stress." "Then talk to me. We're a team, remember? Whatever happens, we'll get through it together." Her words cut him to the heart. Giles knew there were some things they definitely couldn't handle together. She wasn't that kind of woman, and this wasn't that kind of society. "Everything will be fine," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Just give me some time." Gloria wanted to insist, but something in her husband's tone stopped her. She went to bed, but sleep would not come. The man she had spent half her life with lay next to her, and he seemed like a complete stranger. Meanwhile, Michael was experiencing his own emotional turmoil. The kiss in the gazebo had confirmed to him that there was indeed a mutual feeling between them. But Giles's silence in the days that followed was painful. He understood the complexity of the situation. Giles was married, had children, and held a respected position in a conservative town. Admitting to being gay would destroy his entire life. But Michael couldn't just pretend that nothing had happened. On Wednesday evening, he decided to take a desperate step. Knowing that Giles was patrolling the central areas, Michael went for a walk along Main Street. About an hour later, he saw a familiar police car. Giles spotted him from a distance and felt his stomach knot up. He could have driven past, but something made him stop. "Hi," Michael said, approaching the car. "Michael," Giles looked exhausted. "We shouldn't be meeting. This was a mistake." "What was a mistake? That we felt something real?" "I have a family, a wife, children. I can't." "I'm not asking you to leave your family, but pretending there's nothing between us is impossible." Giles looked around. Fortunately, the street was deserted, but in a small town, rumors spread quickly. "Get in the car," he said. "Someone might see us here." Michael got into the passenger seat, and Giles drove to the outskirts of town, where the farm fields began. "You don't understand," Giles said, stopping the car at an abandoned barn. "If this gets out, my life is over. My career, my family, my reputation, everything will be ruined." "What do you suggest? Spend the rest of your life lying?" "It's not a lie. I love my family." "I don't doubt that. But do you love Gloria the way a man loves a woman?" The question hung in the air between them. Giles knew the answer, but he was afraid to say it. "It doesn't matter," he finally said. "What matters is that I made a vow, before God, before my family." "And before yourself? Did you make a vow to be honest with yourself?" They sat in complete silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets in the field. Michael was the first to reach out and cover Giles's hand on the steering wheel. "I don't need promises or decisions right now," he said quietly, "but please don't disappear from my life." Giles looked at their joined hands and felt something inside him give way. All his willpower, all his attempts to be right, crumbled to dust. "Okay," he whispered, "but this has to stay between us. No one can know." Thus began their secret relationship. They met in the evenings in abandoned places on the outskirts of town, exchanged messages through encrypted apps, and stole moments of intimacy when no one was looking. Their first physical encounter took place a week later in the same barn. It was a desperate, passionate act, filled with guilt and liberation at the same time. For Giles, it was a revelation. He finally understood what real desire was. But along with relief came agonizing guilt. Every evening when he returned home to Gloria, he felt like a traitor. She greeted him with a smile, asked about his work, told him about her day, and he just nodded, thinking about how he had lied to her for the past few hours. Meanwhile, Gloria continued her own investigation. The oddities in her husband's behavior not only persisted, but intensified. He became more secretive with his phone, stayed late at work, and sometimes came home smelling of something she couldn't identify. The decisive moment came at the end of August. Gloria was working the night shift at the hospital when a call came in about a car accident. Among the victims was Frank Miller, the banker who had spoken about the new teacher at church. "Gloria," he called to her as she was treating his wounds, "can we talk in private?" She took him to a separate room where Miller suddenly asked, "Do you know that your husband has been seeing that teacher, Thornton?" Gloria's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen them together several times, at the coffee shop, in the park, even at night, by the old barn on the Johnson farm. I thought you knew." Gloria's world spun. Everything fell into place. The delays at work, the strange behavior, the new cologne, the nervousness when the teacher's name was mentioned. "Thanks for telling me," she managed to say, though her voice was shaking. She worked the rest of the night on autopilot, one thought running through her head. What was going on between her husband and this man? When she returned home in the morning, Gloria found Giles having breakfast with the children. He looked calm and content, which only heightened her suspicions. "How was your night?" he asked, kissing her on the cheek. "Fine. How about you? Were you out late last night?" "No, I was home by 9. I watched TV and went to bed early." Gloria knew that was a lie. She had come home in the morning and seen that his car hadn't been there until 10:30. "Giles," she said when the children had left for school, "I need to tell you something." He was alarmed by the serious tone of her voice. "Frank Miller told me something interesting last night at the hospital." The blood drained from Giles's face. He realized their secret was out. "Gloria, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months? That you've been seeing some man in secret? It's not what you think. What is it? What's going on between you and this teacher?" Giles remained silent, knowing that any words would only make the situation worse. Gloria looked at him, and in her eyes he saw not only pain and anger, but something more terrible, disgust. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "At least be honest now." "I'm us!" Giles couldn't find the words. How could he explain to his wife that he had fallen in love with a man? How could he tell her that their 18-year marriage had been a beautiful lie? "Are you sleeping with him?" Gloria asked bluntly. Giles's silence was his answer. Gloria felt something break inside her. Not just her heart, her entire worldview, her entire conception of life, love, and family. "Get out," she said quietly. "Get out of my house, now. Gloria, please, let's talk." "No!" she screamed. "You've disgraced our family. You've betrayed everything we believed in. How could you?" Giles understood her pain, but he couldn't change anything. He had hidden from the truth for too long, and now it was crashing down on both of them. "I'll get my things and leave," he said. But the children shouldn't have to suffer because of our problems. Our problems? Gloria laughed bitterly. This is your problem. You destroyed this family. 3 days had passed since their argument. Giles was staying at a motel on the outskirts of town, waiting for Gloria to cool down so they could talk calmly about the children's future. He hoped that with time she would understand and maybe even forgive him. Gloria, however, spent those days in a state that could only be described as controlled madness. She continued to work at the hospital, smiling at her colleagues and caring for her patients, but inside, she was raging with fury and humiliation. The worst part wasn't that her husband had cheated on her. She could have survived that. The horror was that he had cheated on her with a man, that their 18-year marriage had been based on a lie, that she, a woman, had been unable to satisfy her own husband's needs. On Thursday evening, August 31st, Giles decided to return home for the rest of his things. The children were staying with their Aunt Margaret, where Gloria had sent them for a few days while their parents sorted out their adult problems. She didn't want Brad and Emily to see their family falling apart. Giles parked outside his house at around 8 o'clock in the evening. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. White walls, a neat lawn, pink bushes under the windows. But the atmosphere was different, ominous. Even the light in the windows seemed cold. He entered through the front door using his keys. Only one light was on in the living room, casting long shadows on the walls. Gloria was sitting in her favorite chair, holding a cup of tea that had long since grown cold. "Gloria," he said cautiously, "I came to get my things. I didn't want to bother you, but you're not bothering me," she replied in an even voice without looking up. "This is your home, for now." Giles walked toward the stairs leading to the bedroom, but his wife's voice stopped him. "Giles, sit down. We need to talk." There was something in her tone that made him wary. He slowly sank down onto the sofa opposite his wife's chair. "I've been thinking a lot over the last 3 days," Gloria began, finally looking up. Giles saw something frightening in her eyes, not anger or pain, but a cold determination. "About us, about the children, about what's going to happen. Gloria, I know I've hurt you, but we can work this out, for the sake of the children." "For the sake of the children?" She smiled bitterly. "You think about the children when you're fucking that pervert?" Giles shuddered at the harshness of her words. In all their years of marriage, he had never heard Gloria speak like that. "Don't call him that." "What should I call him? Your lover? Your boyfriend?" She got up from the chair and began pacing the room. "You know what the worst part of this is? It's not that you cheated on me. It's not that you lied to me. It's that I feel like a complete fool." "You're not a fool, Gloria. You're a wonderful woman." "Shut up!" she shouted, giving in to her emotions for the first time in days. "Don't you dare tell me I'm wonderful. If I were so wonderful, my husband wouldn't be running off with another man at night." Giles tried to approach her, but she pulled away as if his touch was repulsive. "Gloria, please listen to me. This has nothing to do with you. You're not to blame. This is my problem. I've always been like this." "Like this? Like a pervert? A faggot?" The words flew out of her mouth like bullets. "And you knew this when you married me? You knew when we made love? When I was giving birth to your children?" "I thought I could change. I thought my love for you and our family would make these feelings go away. And now you think you can just walk away? Destroy everything we've built and start a new life with that teacher?" "I don't know what will happen next. All I can think about right now is how to hurt the children as little as possible." Gloria stopped and looked at her husband for a long time. Thoughts raced through her head about what people would say. How would she look her neighbors, colleagues, and churchgoers in the eye? Everyone in town would know that her husband was gay, that their model marriage was a sham. "The children have already suffered," she said quietly. "Brad asks why Daddy doesn't live at home. Emily cries at night, and you're thinking about starting a new life. I never wanted this to happen, but it did. And you know what? The whole town is already talking about us. Frank Miller isn't the only one who saw you. Today at the hospital, Dr. Hernandez asked if it was true that we were getting divorced." Giles felt his hands drop. It was impossible to hide things like this in a small town. Sooner or later, everyone would find out, and then life would become unbearable not only for him, but for the children as well. "What do you want from me?" he asked wearily. Gloria went to the kitchen and returned with something in her hands. Giles didn't immediately realize that it was his service pistol, which he usually kept in the safe in his bedroom. "Gloria, what are you doing?" "I want you to disappear," she said, holding the gun with both hands. "Forever. Put the gun down. You don't know how to use it." "I'm a nurse, Giles. I know where to aim to kill a man quickly and painlessly." There was such cold certainty in her voice that Giles knew she wasn't bluffing. The woman he had lived with for 18 years, who had given him 2 children, was really prepared to kill him. "Think about the children," he said, slowly raising his hands. "They'll lose their father. They already have. A real father would never disgrace his family like this." "Gloria, please. You know what I'm going to tell everyone? That you came home drunk and aggressive. That you threatened me. I defended myself. They'll believe me more than you in this town." Giles realized she had it all figured out. There was no madness in her eyes, only cold, methodical determination. "I'll leave town," he said desperately. "I'll go far away and you'll never see me again. That's not enough. You'll live, and I'll remember my humiliation every day. You'll tell your lover what a fool I am, that I didn't understand who I was living with for 18 years. I would never—" "Shut up!" The shot rang out deafeningly in the silence of the house. The bullet hit Giles in the chest, just to the left of his heart. He collapsed to the floor, blood quickly spreading across his shirt. Gloria stood over him, still holding the gun. Giles tried to say something, but only blood came out of his mouth. His eyes gradually clouded over. "Forgive me," Gloria whispered, but it was unclear who she was asking for forgiveness, her husband or God. Giles Robinson died 3 minutes later, choking on his own blood on the living room floor, in the house he once considered the safest place on earth. Gloria lowered the gun and stood silently for a long time, staring at her husband's body. Then she went to the bathroom, washed her hands thoroughly, fixed her hair, and dialed 911. "Emergency dispatch. I need the police," she said in a trembling voice. "Someone killed my husband." Officer Rick Davis, Giles's partner, was the first to arrive at the scene. When he saw his colleague's body, he turned pale and struggled to keep from fainting. "What happened?" he asked Gloria, who was sitting in a chair covered with a blanket. "I don't know," she replied in a trembling voice. "I was in the shower. I heard a gunshot, ran out, and he was already lying on the floor." "Did you see who did it?" The front door was open. The killer must have gotten away." Davis carefully examined the scene. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing had been stolen, and the door was indeed open. But something bothered him. It was all too neat for a robbery. Half an hour later, Detective Arabella Connor arrived from the county office. At 45, she was one of the most experienced investigators in the county, specializing in homicides and serious crimes. Tall, with short graying hair and piercing gray eyes, she had a reputation as a meticulous and incorruptible professional. "What do we have?" she asked Davis. "Giles Robinson, 42 years old, local police sergeant. Shot with his own service weapon. His wife says she was in the shower and didn't see anything." Connor examined the body carefully. One shot to the chest, close to the heart. Professional work for someone who knows how to handle a gun. "Where's the gun?" "Next to the body. But strangely, there are no fingerprints except Robinson's. Someone wiped them off, or wore gloves." Connor turned to Gloria. "Mrs. Robinson, I need to ask you a few questions." Gloria nodded, looking shocked. "Of course. Anything that will help find my husband's killer." "How was your relationship with your husband?" "Good. We were married for 18 years. We were happy. No problems? Debts? Enemies?" "No, nothing like that. Giles was a good man. Everyone loved him." Connor wrote down the answers, but her experienced eye noticed inconsistencies. The answers were too quick, too correct. And those dry eyes, a woman who had lost her husband in such circumstances should have been crying. "Mrs. Robinson, I understand this is difficult, but I need to know, did your husband have any affairs?" Gloria tensed almost imperceptibly, but Connor noticed. "No, of course not. Giles was a faithful husband. Friends, Maybe some new acquaintances lately. He socialized with colleagues, neighbors, the usual for a small town. Connor decided not to press the issue for now. The woman was either genuinely in shock or a remarkable actress. "Where are your children?" "At my sister's. I sent them there for a few days while we were having work done at our house." "What kind of work?" Gloria hesitated for a second. "The bathroom. We were replacing the tiles." But Connor had already seen the bathroom. No signs of renovation. Lie number 2. "Mrs. Robinson, could you come with us to the station? We need to file an official statement." "Of course, whatever you need." While the forensic team worked at the crime scene, Connor questioned Gloria at the station. The woman appeared confident, but the detective noticed minor inconsistencies in her story. "You said you were in the shower. For how long?" 20 minutes, I think." "And you didn't hear anyone come into the house?" "No, the water was running." "What about the front door? Was it locked?" "Well, I don't know. Maybe Giles didn't have time to lock it." "But you said he was already home when you went to take a shower?" Gloria realized she was getting confused in her testimony. "I don't remember exactly. It all happened so fast." Connor put down her pen and looked at the woman intently. "Mrs. Robinson, I'll be working on this case for a few days. I'll check all possible leads. If you're hiding anything, it's better to tell me now." "I'm not hiding anything. I just want you to find the killer." "We will find him," Connor promised. After Gloria left, the detective began gathering information about the Robinson family. Conversations with neighbors, colleagues, and friends painted a picture of a model family with no apparent problems. But experience told Connor that behind a facade of prosperity often lie the darkest secrets. A conversation with Officer Davis proved crucial. Giles had been acting strange for the last few months, he admitted. "Distracted, pensive. I thought he was having problems at home or at work." "What kind of problems?" "I don't know. He became secretive. And recently I saw him at a coffee shop with a new teacher, Michael Thornton. It seemed strange." "Why strange?" "Well, they were sitting very close together, talking quietly as if they were discussing something secret. Michael Thornton's name became the first real lead in the case. Connor decided that tomorrow she would start by talking to the teacher. Friday, September 1st, began for Detective Connor with a visit to Michael Thornton. The teacher lived in a modest apartment on the second floor of an old house on Elm Street. When he opened the door, Connor immediately realized that this man was hiding something. "Mr. Thornton? Detective Connor, County Police. I need to talk to you about the murder of Giles Robinson." Michael turned pale and was speechless for a moment. "Giles was killed? Last night, didn't you know?" "No, I didn't. Oh my God." He stepped back, letting the detective into the apartment. "How did it happen?" "That's what I'm trying to find out. Officer Davis said you knew the victim." "Yes, we saw each other occasionally. He helped me get settled in the city." Connor studied Thornton's reaction closely. The man was clearly shaken by the news, but his demeanor betrayed not only grief, but also fear. "How often did you see each other?" "Not very often. A few times at the coffee shop, sometimes we went for walks in the park." "When was the last time you saw him?" Michael hesitated. "The night before last, on Tuesday." "Where?" "At the old barn on the Johnson farm." Connor raised an eyebrow. This was the first coincidence with Frank Miller's testimony, who had seen them there earlier. "What were you doing in such a remote place?" "Talking. Giles said he was having problems at home. He needed someone to talk to." "What kind of problems?" Michael stood up and walked over to the window, turning away from the detective. He was going to divorce his wife. "Why?" A long pause. Connor waited, knowing that she was about to hear some crucial information. "Because he loved me," Michael said quietly. The puzzle began to fall into place in the detective's mind. A secret affair, a betrayed wife, a murder out of jealousy. A classic scenario, but with an unexpected twist. "Tell me more about your relationship." Michael turned to face her. His eyes were filled with tears. "Giles struggled with his sexuality his whole life. He married Gloria, thinking it would help him become normal. But when we met, were you physically intimate?" "Yes, for the last 2 months." "Did Gloria know about this?" "Giles said she figured it out. That's why he left home for a few days. We were planning to leave town together." Connor wrote down the statement, realizing she had a motive for murder. A betrayed wife who had learned of her husband's homosexual affair could well have resorted to extreme measures. "Mr. Thornton, you'd better stay home for a while. In a small town, people can react badly to news like this." After talking to Michael, Connor drove to the hospital where Gloria worked. She needed to check her alibi and talk to her colleagues. Dr. Maria Hernandez met the detective in her office. "Gloria worked until 7 last night," she confirmed. "But she's been kind of down the last few weeks. I thought it was family problems." "Did she talk about any problems?" "Not directly, but she asked me once if I knew a good divorce lawyer." "When was that?" "About 2 weeks ago." This was further confirmation that there were serious problems in the Robinson family, despite their outward appearance of prosperity. Connor returned to the station and began analyzing the information she had gathered. The picture was becoming clearer. Gloria knew about her husband's affair, they had a fight, and he left home. Yesterday, he returned for his belongings, and a confrontation ensued, ending in murder. But she needed proof. Connor carefully studied the forensic report. The gunpowder residue on Gloria's hands had been washed off in the shower she took after the murder. However, microscopic particles remained on her clothes that could link her to the shooting. The forensic team also discovered that the gun had been thoroughly cleaned after the murder, but a partial thumbprint remained on the trigger. It was not enough for identification, but the size matched Gloria's hand. On Saturday morning, Connor received the results of the crime scene investigation. Analysis of the blood spatter showed that the shooter was about 2 meters away from the victim, exactly where Gloria's chair had been. The detective decided to conduct a second interview. Gloria arrived at the station, still pretending to be a grief-stricken widow. "Mrs. Robinson, I want to clarify a few details. You said you had a good relationship with your husband." "Yes, of course." "Then why did you ask Dr. Hernandez about a divorce lawyer 2 weeks ago?" Gloria tensed up. "That wasn't for me. I was asking for a friend." "What friend? From another city? You don't know her?" "Mrs. Robinson, I have also learned that your husband had been seeing Michael Thornton for the past few months. What do you know about that?" "Nothing. Giles could have been seeing anyone." "Even if these meetings were secret? In remote locations?" Gloria remained silent, realizing that the detective knew more than he was letting on. "Michael Thornton told me about your marital problems. He said your husband was planning to divorce you." "That's a lie. He also said they were having an affair, that your husband was homosexual." Gloria jumped up, her face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare repeat that filth! My husband was a normal man." "But you knew about his orientation, didn't you? You knew about the affair. That's why you killed him." "I didn't kill anyone. I loved my husband." "Loved him or hated him for humiliating you?" Connor saw Gloria losing control. The mask of the grieving widow slipped away, revealing a woman full of rage and pain. "You know what the worst part is?" Gloria said suddenly in a quiet voice. "It's not that he was cheating on me. It's that he was cheating on me with a man, that our children are the children of a faggot." "That's why you killed him?" "I didn't kill him!" Gloria shouted. "But if you did, he deserved it. He destroyed our family. He disgraced our children." "Mrs. Robinson, I have proof." "What proof?" "Gunpowder residue on your clothes. Blood spatter shows that the shot was fired from where you were sitting. Your partial fingerprint is on the trigger." Gloria sat back down in her chair, realizing the game was over. "You want to know the truth?" she said wearily. "He came home to get his things. He said he loved his teacher, that he wanted to start a new life with him. Was I supposed to just agree? Raise the children alone? Listen to gossip about my husband leaving me for a man? That's why you took his gun?" "I didn't plan to kill him. I just wanted to scare him, make him stay for the children." "But you fired." "He said he would go away with him, that he would live happily, and I would be left here with the stigma of being the wife of a faggot." Gloria was now crying for real, not out of grief, but out of rage and despair. "I gave him the best years of my life. I gave birth to his children, and he used me as a cover." Connor understood this woman's pain, but a crime was a crime. "Gloria Robinson, you are under arrest on suspicion of first-degree murder." The news of Gloria's arrest shook Santa Paula. The small town couldn't believe that the model wife and mother was a murderer. But even more people were shocked by the truth about Giles and his secret affair. Michael Thornton left town the day after Gloria's arrest. He couldn't stay where every glance was full of condemnation or curiosity. The Robinson children stayed with Aunt Margaret. Brad and Emily not only lost their father, but also learned that their mother had killed him. The psychological trauma was so severe that it took years of therapy. Reverend James White held a special service dedicated to forgiveness and understanding. But the community was divided. Some sympathized with Gloria as a deceived wife, while others condemned her as a murderer. The trial took place 6 months later. Gloria confessed to the murder, but her lawyer insisted that it was a crime of passion. The prosecutor demanded the maximum punishment for cold-blooded murder. Detective Connor testified as the prosecution's key witness. She recounted how Gloria had carefully staged the robbery, lied in her statements, and tried to hide the true motive for the murder. The defendant not only killed her husband, Connor said in court. She tried to pin it on an unknown criminal and was willing to let an innocent man be arrested. Gloria was sentenced to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. In her final statement, she said, "I don't regret what I did. My only regret is that my children have to carry this burden." The Robinson case was a turning point for Santa Paula. The town, which considered itself a bastion of traditional values, was forced to confront the reality of the modern world, where families can hide dark secrets and love does not always conform to accepted norms. Officer Davis, who lost his partner and friend, transferred to another district. He could no longer patrol the streets where memories of Giles were everywhere. The house on Oak Street stood empty for months. Neighbors said that sometimes the lights were on at night, but it was just the street lights reflecting off the empty windows. The story of the Robinson family is a warning about how lies and secrecy can destroy lives. Giles, who tried to live up to society's expectations, paid with his life for not being able to be himself. Gloria, unable to accept the truth about her husband, lost not only him, but also her own freedom. And the two children were left orphaned, not only because they lost their parents, but also because they lost their faith that adults could protect them from the cruelty of the world.